Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sleepless Cinematic Podcast, where we explore our shared love for watching and discussing movies recorded in the late after work hours, often in lieu of a good night's rest. I'm Julian.
I'm Emilio.
And I'm Madeline. In addition to our theme cycle episodes, we release every 2 weeks. We record one-off bonus episodes as we see fit. And we've seen fit this week to record one of these bonus episodes to talk about a classic film from the 1980s, one that really needs no introduction, E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial, or as it's better known, E.T.
And we are joined today by what can only be described as a real one in the field of pop culture writing and thought. He is the founder / editor of the music reissue site The Second Disc, and he's also penned Hollywood and Spine, which is a newsletter devoted to film novelizations and their important place alongside the movies themselves. His archived works and his new writing can currently be found at Duke's Delight. That's dukes-delight.ghost.io. He is a real champion of physical media, which is something near and dear to my heart. He is the new father of twin girls, and he loves to share his passion for the art that he admires. So we welcome Mike Duquette to the podcast. Mike, thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
For taking time out of your busy life to be here, man.
You know, they're sleeping soundly through the night now, so I can come whenever I want.
Yeah, it's a party now.
If I can say, we were going to do this the week that my daughters were born. I was rushing back to my apartment to bring to the hospital and, have to email the cat sitter, have to text my family, have to text my wife's family. And I had to email you and say, hey, remember how we were going to record this podcast on such and such a day?
Something's
not
come
gonna
up.
happen.
Yeah, not gonna be able to do it. That's okay, man. You got a wonderful thing instead.
Yes.
This is a classic film. This is E.T., by the way, which is not to be confused with Mac and Me, which is a laughably bad, I'm going to say destitute man's version of E.T. That was released in 1988. Its memory was dubiously kept alive by Paul Rudd, who every time we went on Late Night with Conan O'Brien to promote a movie, instead of showing a clip from the film that he was there to promote, he'd show a scene from Mac and Me. And this movie also has one of the most unforgivable product placement scenes I've ever seen in a film, which is an extended dance sequence at McDonald's. This is not Mac and Me. Not that.
No.
Yeah. Should also not be confused with a much more recent and very tonally different film called E.O., which was
The donkey movie.
The Donkey Movie.
Yes.
Yes. The 2022 film directed by Jerzy Skolimowski about a nomadic donkey, which, as a film with this 2-letter acronym about a lost creature, certainly should not be confused with E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial.
Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah.
We also don't want to confuse this film with Y Tu Mama Tambien, which is an extraordinarily different film from 2001, Alfonso Cuarón's film.
Yeah. Also not to be confused with Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Oh, yes.
Another very different film in many ways. Also not to be confused with It.
Oh,
The Stephen
You're
King
so
novel
right.
or the several different film adaptations.
I mean,
of
they
it.
are both works that follow kids encountering, new presences in their lives. So
one way to
I
put it.
understand. Yeah. No, we're not talking any of those films. We are talking E.T. Now, I know that E.T. is an extremely important film to you, Mike. And I'd love for you to maybe just set this up a little bit. Like, what is E.T. to you? How did you come to it? And how has this movie played an important role in your life?
Sure. I think to call it the Magna Carta of my own personal taste, aesthetic, belief system is, maybe over-exaggerating it a little bit, but it's true in many ways. I saw it as a child. It was around Christmas time. I was very young, 2 or 3. I don't remember. My brother's 3 years younger than me. I don't remember if he was born yet or not. I had made my way into my grandparents' house in a room that just happened to have some videotapes, and I pulled out, you see this spine that says E.T. in these weathered kind of letters, and whatever articulation I had at the time, I asked, can we please put this on? Approximately 10 minutes in, I was terrified. The beginning of the movie is a little scary for children. Eventually, I powered my way through and watched it again and again and again and again. I could not tell you how many times I've watched it, but for me, it is just, first of all, it was an introduction to the work of Steven Spielberg, a director who I hold exceptionally dear. I think we're at the point we don't need to defend him anymore. I think we've really there was a point where we needed to do that, I think, but now I think
the Ready Player One time.
Yes, but people get it that he's a really great craftsman who also makes movies that are not just visually appealing, but also have a lot of heart. And to me, E.T. is the apotheosis of that idea. It's a very, it's a shockingly intimate movie, but it's not inaccessible. If you put E.T. next to Star Wars or Jaws or Titanic or Avengers, like all those movies make sense that, oh wow, yeah, millions and millions of people came out to see it. But this movie, which was made for a fraction of the cost and is so much more intimate and is so much more, as much as there is a fantastical creature, is so people driven, and it just connected with everybody.
Yeah, everybody. You're absolutely right. Yeah, this is about as universally loved a film as I think has ever been made.
It's like the Wizard of Oz in a way. It's a movie that does connect you to some collective unconscious about what it's like to be when the world seems confusing but full of possibility when you're small. And the pain that we sometimes feel of loneliness and how that can be filled in this case a very fantastical way, and how it just that all those feelings just profoundly affect and change a couple people's lives for the absolute better.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I think that's extremely well said. What about you guys? What's your previous exposure to E.T.?
I don't think I have a distinct memory of watching this for the first time. I'm going to anticipate that, Julian, you do. But I feel like I probably saw this for the first time. I don't think I was super young, because I do think that, much like you, Mike, I would have been scared shitless seeing this as a small child. I was absolutely a scaredy cat. So I can't imagine that my parents wanted to put this on for me, because they knew it would scare me and I'd be hiding under a blanket. So I feel like I probably saw this, I'm going to say between like 10 and 13 for the first time would be my guess. And I've seen it a handful of times since then, but I revisited it. Yeah. How old are your twins now?
They're 4.5 months.
So I revisited it about 5 months ago in preparation for our originally scheduled conversation. And then again in the last week, I watched it last night again. And one thing that I love that you kind of started to touch on is that this is a film that it will connect with a child one way, and I think it can carry over to adulthood, but then I think you can connect with it in a very different way as an adult. And I imagine an even different way as a parent. So I'll be curious to hear from you guys about that.
Yeah, the day I show it to my kids, what is wrong with Dad? Why is he crying so much?
Yeah. How about you, Julian?
Well, for me, I mean, I like that you anticipated that, Madeline, but it's actually not as specific a memory as you might be programmed to think. But I mean, I can roughly remember when I first saw the movie. I think I was 11 when I first saw it. I mean, it left an impression on me. How could it not? But at that time in my life, I had already kind of had ingrained childhood fascinations with certain movies. I mean, the thing in my childhood that was definitive was Star Wars.
Did you love the Star Wars references in this movie when you were a kid?
I did, yeah. But I think, it's, seeing those references after having Star Wars drilled into my brain, I was kind of like, yeah, this movie knows what it's paying tribute to. But then also, it was not the first Spielberg movie that I saw, too. Before that, at even younger ages, I had seen the Jurassic Park movies, as well as the Indiana Jones movies. Really, both franchises are harsher movies than E.T. I was a bit of a scaredy cat as a kid as well, but not to those things. I think, when you watch something with intensity as a kid, it helps if it has a happy ending.
Yeah.
E.T. was not the first Spielberg movie I saw, so by the time that I did, I think I kind of got his general vibe.
Yeah.
I don't know if I really had that much to say about it as an 11-year-old seeing it, but I liked it. It was definitely a great time. seeing it again as an adult, I think, just watching it a few months ago for the originally planned conversation was the first time I had seen it since I was a kid. And of course, I can see a lot more that I can appreciate a little bit more thoroughly now. And yeah, we'll get into some of that specific appreciation as this conversation unfolds.
I'll say I also don't remember the first time I saw this movie.
Yeah.
I, like you guys, kind of a scaredy cat as well. And there are some images that are burned into my brain. I definitely saw it when I was young enough, I think, for images like seeing E.T. like alongside the river, just like white.
Oh
also,
my gosh.
Oh
just
boy.
Horrifying, like a slab
exactly,
of meat.
exactly. Also, the hazmat suits, the guys coming in, like the
Yeah,
home
and like
invasion.
full spaceman gear.
Exactly. Like the home invasion stuff, definitely terrifying. So honestly, for a while, this movie did not sit in my brain as this like
Warm.
joyful cinematic experience. At some point in my teen years, I did come back to it, but I don't have a good memory of that either. But during the pandemic, I found a $3 copy of it on Blu-ray, and I bought it, and it absolutely blew me away. I was like, of course. I mean, this movie is a stone cold classic, and seeing it with this new set of eyes, now as an adult, now as a parent, and I think as a more like lived in fan of movies, I mean, this movie, I love it. It can exist separate, I think, from any nostalgia you might have from it as well. That I find is kind of interesting. But yeah, it's as good as the hype and then some. So yeah.
We'd be remiss if we didn't mention that your initials are E.T.
That's true. Actually, you're so right. I cannot believe I blocked this out of my brain for this conversation. For years as a kid, I was told E.T. phone home constantly. Wow, my God. I can't believe I didn't lead with that.
When I texted you on the way up here,
Yeah.
it kind of clicked because, with the iPhone, it shows you the initials.
Right.
And I was like, ooh.
There we go. Yeah, we're doing it. Man,
Yeah.
I mean, so, this movie, I think, has kind of an interesting provenance. I mean, it came from an autobiographical place for Spielberg.
Yeah,
Maybe we can get
definitely.
into this a little bit, but he went, and I guess gave the seed of this idea to Melissa Matheson.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the story goes that he was, they were in Tunisia for the production of Raiders, and it's hot. Everyone has dysentery. That's why
Sounds amazing.
it was a tough shoot, and and he's reeling from the relative failure of 1941, and committed to making this movie on time and under budget. And his mind was wandering, and he started thinking about, well, what if I was doing at some point, a more personal film? At the time, he didn't talk about the divorce of his parents, which, of course, by now, he's made enough in his filmography, especially with The Fabelmans, where it's like, oh, yes, it all makes sense now. But that was clearly front of mind, and I think just sort of the loneliness of being a director working on a big project like this and wanting to do something a little different at some point, and then he kind of had this kernel of an idea. Melissa Matheson was dating at the time, later was married for a long time to Harrison Ford.
Is that maybe why the Tunisia thing happened?
Yes,
because they were filming.
She was there.
Yeah, there we go.
And he had said to her, he said, "I have this idea. I think you would be perfect to do it, to write it." One person who's really crucial, I think, to the success of E.T. was Steven's assistant on Raiders. The set of Raiders was a woman named Kathleen Kennedy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
He really enjoyed her tenacity, and he said, I want you to produce this movie. So she goes from assistant to producer with Steven. They produce this movie. Producers are nominated for Best Picture. So her first production role, and then, of course, she and Steven and Frank Marshall, her now husband, who's also a great producer who worked on Raiders, they are basically the core of Amblin.
That's right.
Just the Gremlins, the Goonies, Back to the Future, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, just the 80s, a whole subgenre unto itself. Everyone was on their A game.
Yeah, for sure.
And the cast that they picked, and picking Drew Barrymore out of nowhere, Henry Thomas, of course, is Elliot. I always want to give a shout out because he is, in my travels as an ET enthusiast, he has become a little bit of a friend. I do want to shout out Robert McNaughton, who plays Michael, the older brother.
He's great in this.
He's amazing.
Who is just, I am drawn to him every time, not only because I am a Michael.
That's true.
But because he has a fantastic role in this ostensibly broken fatherless family, of feeling the need to ascend to something that he is not qualified for, that no 14, 15-year-old dares need to be qualified for, the grace with which he delivers that.
I also just want to mention, on a very meta note here, you've used the word ostensibly, and you're going to fit right in this podcast because that's one of my favorite words to use. How about you guys? Any thoughts on kind of more a production level?
I mean, for one thing, you can't not be impressed by the creature effects. Like that's something that Spielberg is known for. And I mean, it's, funny for me too that even as a kid, with this not being the first movie I saw, I mean, I think I was pretty unsurprised by the movie having a great creature effect, having been primed with Jurassic Park.
Of course.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Mike, you mentioned too that like a lot of the cast in this movie, they're not like big name stars. And I feel like that can be an underappreciated aspect of Steven Spielberg as a director, as a caster of actors, is that he often gets a lot of people in his movies who really work very well for them, who are not the biggest names. I mean, to connect to Jurassic Park again, like, everyone in that movie I think works perfectly well, but like Sam Neill and Laura Dern, they're more, I mean, when you look at the rest of their careers, it's more indie movies.
Right. Steven, I think we underrate his tendency to get people on the way up.
Yeah.
Particularly children. Only 5 years after this, he did Empire of the Sun with Christian Bale.
Yeah.
And I mean, we
Look
regard him
there.
we regard him as rightly as one of the greater actors
Of his generation,
and just the humanity. Steven's in his 30s, he's not married yet, he has no children, but the way that he speaks and coaxes these performances out of actors, the movie lets them be rough edged. I think about early on when Elliot has seen E.T. and he is trying to convince his family. And he just called his brother penis breath.
It's one of my favorite
and it's
parts
a
of the
great
movie.
line. And then what happens right after that? The air gets taken out of the room, and he says, "Dad would believe me."
Yeah.
And you see a table with one woman and 3 kids, and if you're not thinking about it, divorce is very common in society. You might not think about it, and you think about what those words mean, and then the follow up. Maybe I'll call your father and tell him about it. I can't. He's in Mexico with Sally, and it's like that a 10-year-old could wound that, and successfully does, and it's just really.
I mean, the divorce aspect of this film was something that I honestly did not even clock for years and years.
Now, for me, it was because, of course, my parents are not divorced, so maybe it's privilege on my part.
Right. No, totally. But I mean, I think that there's so much indelible imagery in this film, the creature design and, the score, which we're going to get to, I'm sure. I mean, there's so much that you take in where you can almost sort of separate, I think, some of the context from a lot of what happens in it.
Yeah, and I think that you mentioned The Fabelmans. I think this is a film I can appreciate even more after The Fabelmans.
Yeah, me too.
Many of his movies are like that, I think.
Totally.
It's a real.
The more Spielberg you watch, the more you appreciate the ones you had seen early on. But I mean, we talked a little bit about, the divorce aspect of it and how this is such a personal film for him. But even just one of the things I loved about The Fabelmans is also seeing him as a very young director and trying out, his future techniques with these kids in his neighborhood. I thought about that a lot during all the scenes on the bicycles, like the chase scene after they have, escaped their house and whoever they are, the army.
Yeah, whatever.
And all of their friends are they're in the little V riding down the
like birds.
Yeah, the birds V riding their bicycles down the street before they all take off in flight. It made me think a lot of The Fabelmans. I imagine that Steven Spielberg working from when he was himself kind of a kid and a teen, making these films as a kid. I imagine helped him even as he got slightly older to be able to know how to work with kids.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even if he no longer was of that age, he had done it before.
Yeah. And to the point you mentioned earlier, Mike, I think he's gone on record saying that this was the movie that made him realize that he wanted to be a dad.
Yeah.
And when you watch the behind the scenes stuff and you see how much care and attention he is putting on their performances and their experience as actors, you can really see that This is a guy who's probably going to be a really great dad.
Again, it's a testament to Spielberg that the environment that he created on that set was so caring to the needs of these kids. You know, famously, a lot of the stuff on sets was shot in sequence. And so these kids were developing these relationships with each other and with their co-stars and with this, you know, being that the brilliant Carlo Rambaldi, who did the head on Alien, who did the aliens in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which
There we go.
no discussion of E.T., I think, is fair to have without citing, you know, that like Close Encounters, which is a brilliant movie, but in a way,
totally.
it did sort of walk. So it ran, so E.T. could fly.
Yeah, there we go. I got you. I was following that. That's great. Yeah, I'm wondering if we can get a little bit into maybe some of the elements of the plot that really kind of like drive us on this. We talked about how there was a little bit of a scaredy cat element, I think, to our early experiences watching this. If you're young, the movie feels like there's a definitive bad guy.
Yeah.
Right?
At first.
And I would say because that stuff is so strong, I feel like it's really hard to overcome that when you're a kid.
Yeah.
But when you watch it and you're a little bit older, some of the real depth that's in this has to do with the fact that there isn't like a clear-cut villain. And although there are moments that really portray, I guess, these shadowy government figures as villains, you get that incredible moment with the Keyes character and Elliot, and how that humanizes him right away. And you have all these scientists and these experts that have come to figure out what's going on with E.T. and handle this alien. And there is clearly a sense of wonder for them about this too, right? But that they're adults now and that their sense of wonder has been hijacked by their jobs.
They're also coming in at a point in E.T.'s journey where some things have gone very wrong.
Yes,
you
that's
know,
true.
I imagine that if they were coming in when he was healthy and newer to the planet, that perhaps they would not be acting. I feel like aggressive is the wrong word, but you know, they would be acting
pretty aggressive,
acting a little less aggressive. You know, if they didn't feel like there was something they had to solve, they had to cure him, they had to save him. Right. And they only know how to do that through their expertise.
But why do they want to save him? They want to preserve him because they're adults now. And their context with this alien is he's a specimen for medical research or to be studied so that they can acquire some superior knowledge, you know, to some other country or something. And so there is this thing that happens in that exchange with Keyes where he recognizes that Elliot has engaged with this creature with no ulterior motives. Yeah. Which is something that none of the adults can claim that they can do.
But he's the closest, which is what's great.
He is the closest.
Yes. You know,
he's the bridge.
For Keyes to say, I've been wishing for this since I was 10 years old.
Yeah, it hits so hard.
And that's not something he's telling a kid just to get the kid to listen. You know, like, God bless Peter Coyote. You know, Dee as well. Dee Wallace, I think, are
Dee Wallace is the mom.
The mom, and you think of the many adults that are not seen. There's the back of them, the legs. Yeah. You know, and then Dee and Peter, as Mary and Keyes, are kind of the exceptions to that rule, and they are not. You know, Mary might wear her little power suit going to the office, but, you know, she's one of the kids still. And even, you know, even that little Betty Boop pin on her on her lapel, like, to me, that there's a little bit of whimsy there. And just the lines on Peter's face as Keyes.
I love it, too, because you are withheld from seeing his face for so long.
And you think you're not going to.
Yeah, exactly. I think that, I mean, you said that the mother, Mary Dee Wallace, she's the only adult that we see in full view for like the first half of the film or so. And then Keyes is the next one that we see. And as soon as they finally reveal the upper half of Keyes, then we do start to get quick glimpses of other adults. And I think that that's such an interesting and smart choice, how we're seeing all these adults up until that point in like kind of a Charlie Brown version of the world. And kind of from the perspective of a child, that we're only seeing the bottom of them. We're only seeing, like you said, the back of the head or in shadow. I love how Keyes is, as you said, the bridge, not just between like Elliot and the rest of these, you know, shadowy scientists, but I think he's the bridge in the film itself between Act 1 and Act 2.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Yeah, great way of putting it.
Yeah, and well, I mean, you're mentioning like how the film hits you as an adult, but we've already talked a little bit about how vivid its portrayal of childhood is too. I kept thinking about like the zeitgeist of the time around E.T., that this is such a seminal movie, but when I think of like the years leading up to it, it's kind of hard to think about movies that foreground the child experience in ways. There's not nothing, but it's like some of the first things I can think of are actually probably horror movies, and I'll name a few in just a second. Then on the flip side, I mean, there's so many movies that have obviously been influenced by E.T.
Yeah, I feel like this movie left such an imprint on culture.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yet still, I think it can be arguably a little tricky to find things in the years since it that treat childhood as delicately as the film does.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so what do we all think of E.T.'s portrayal of childhood, both on its own merits and in the greater zeitgeist?
I mean, the only movie that I could think of that sort of does what E.T. does, that was a predecessor to it, was Escape to Witch Mountain. Do you guys know that one?
No.
I know of it. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it kind of does a similar thing where it's like, but they've merged alien and child. Right. You know? But it does that thing where it's from the children's perspective. It's their journey, it's their danger that you are being asked to empathize with. I really can't think of too many others, and I feel like that is coming back to something that you said, Mike, which is, I think, and I don't want to just give this guy all the credit in the world, but I think Steven Spielberg is an extremely insightful person when it comes to why people go to the movies. And I think that he was really in touch with this idea that there is a child in all of us that still feels, and that this is a wonderful evocation of something that could tap into that part of an audience goer.
The real ones, to coin a phrase, no. Because, why do we go to the movies if not to be manipulated that way? Like, what is
To
wrong?
laugh, to cry,
Yes.
to care.
What is, No, it's just fascinating when I
Nicole Kidman has entered the chat.
Oh boy. When people, especially when people sort of levy that at Steven's feet.
Yeah.
He's a master manipulator. Isn't that why you're here?
Yeah. Didn't they say that about Alfred Hitchcock?
Yeah, I don't think
Playing the
that's
audience like a piano?
I don't think that's a bad thing.
No, neither do I.
And again, a year before E.T., here is an adventurer out of the 30s, and he's going to get chased by a perfectly spherical boulder. And that image is going to burn into your retinas for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Like, or to see the bikes go across the moon.
Totally. I mean, has there ever been a movie that's made bikes cooler than E.T.?
And again, to the point about the child experience, something in every garage and every backyard in America.
Totally.
A bicycle.
Yes. Yep.
Something so simple. And to turn that into a talisman for unbelievable magic as they did.
I also love it as like this extension of children's imagination. Like you think about how a bike doesn't need like a paved road.
Right.
It can go anywhere. There's just enough surface underneath it to
look,
travel.
we love lightsabers. We love things like that. But again, to turn something that you can access already. I remember Robert had said the first time he saw the final cut, of a previous
This is Robert
screening.
McNaughton?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when he saw it, and he knew something that his friends didn't, and so every time he rode his bike, and he'd hear John Williams' theme in his head, and how many millions of kids rode around their neighborhood thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's you can't.
It's special. It's really great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned lightsabers a moment ago, and I mean, I think like Star Wars obviously comes a few years before E.T. and is a huge phenomenon, but it's interesting to that like Star Wars is by definition a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah.
It does not have the literal down to earthness that a film like E.T. does. I mean, thinking of sci-fi leading up to E.T. as well. I mean, one of the other really salient examples in my mind is Alien. Salient.
Another word we love to use here.
Salient, alien. Yeah, you get the idea. But that movie where, there are humans in it and Earth exists, but you don't see Earth. And it's all adults too. There's no kid, even though there's all this imagery in the movie about birth. but it's more like biological and horrific than what we see in E.T., where it is really more pure of heart. Like E.T. noticeably marries Earth with space in a way that I feel like many movies do not quite so obviously in the years before. But then, I mentioned as well that like some of these more vivid depictions of childhood preceding the film come in horror movies. And I had to think, well, when you think of like young actors being directed being shown very abundantly in a film, I had to think of The Shining, frankly.
Yeah.
Or The Omen is another one.
Which I haven't seen yet, but I've heard about it. And
Damien.
And I think like The Shining, I think the actor who played Danny in that was about 6 at the time too. And I think the word is that Stanley Kubrick somehow managed to convince him it wasn't a horror movie.
I've heard this.
I heard that too.
I have trouble imagining it.
It was something like, all right, we're going to play this game where you hide in this cupboard and then come out and then run and scream away from...
It's all fun. It's just fun.
But then there are these incredible close-ups of his face in that movie. And as dark a connection as it is, one other movie that I thought about a few times watching E.T. for a few reasons was actually The Exorcist. Not just because of like the parent and child dynamic in it, but also because of the realistic logic within the story. I particularly thought about The Exorcist during the sequence when E.T. is dying and all those doctors are there.
Yeah, because that in The Exorcist, that's such a heartbreaking moment. Is when the daughter is being like tested on, and the mother is so beside herself with like they can't find any answers. And the scientists in E.T. cannot find any answers.
Right.
Perhaps there are none to be found.
Right. That all possible ideas are utilized and solutions are attempted with them, but none of them work. And ultimately, the resolution, it's a resolution in E.T. You could call it a resolution in The Exorcist, though it's very, very qualified.
That's true.
Ultimately, what happens to resolve the problems of the narratives are metaphysical. And so, but then Spielberg is giving this much brighter spin on it. And I feel like, he had to have been conscious of the darkness that was in cinema in the years leading up. And I think a through line of a lot of these horror movies that portray childhood rather vividly in the 70s is that there's a central theme in them of the fears of being a parent. And which is, also makes for an interesting dimension when you consider the flip that E.T. has by really making the child the main character.
Yeah.
And so, it's just all these different dimensions that highlight the innovations that Spielberg makes with E.T. And I feel like, as has been said before, ever since that movie comes out, you see so much in the years following it that echoes it. So it feels like that sense of childhood being foregrounded, it never left. It feels like a very familiar thing in movies ever since. It kind of blows my mind to consider how much that wasn't really there beforehand.
Yeah, and we gave Melissa Matheson a shout out earlier, but I think that she's obviously so central to this. And she spoke a little bit about how I think she has a lot of nieces and nephews who were alive at the time and really use that as inspiration to like, how do kids talk? How do kids interact with each other? And I think that is so much of the heart of this film is not only how the kids interact with E.T., but how they interact with each other, how they interact with their friends. They seem to all be Mike's friends. We don't really meet any of Elliot's friends.
Greg.
Greg. I think Tyler's one.
Tyler's another one. Seems to be a little antagonistic.
There's that girl who has a crush on Elliot.
Oh, that's right.
But she's listed as pretty girl in the credit.
You know what's crazy? I can't remember her name. Erica
Leniak.
There you go. Yeah, she grew up to be the female love interest in the only watchable Steven Seagal movie, Under Siege.
She was also, I believe, on Baywatch for quite some time.
I think she parlayed this moment into something of a career.
Well, again, and that's Steven's ability to sniff out talent. I want to build off that. Melissa's ability to conjure up these images. She had asked, either it was Harrison's kids or some kids, if you had an alien friend, what's one thing you'd want him to do? And a kid said, and she picked up on this, she goes, I just want, if you're hurt, I want him to make you feel better. And again, one of the indelible images of this movie, all of a sudden, these long fingers that E.T. has, suddenly one lights up and heals a cut on Elliot's finger out of nowhere. It's not telegraphed anywhere. All of a sudden, oh my, what? And it's just a beautiful moment. And then, of course, next time you see it, it's for comedy.
I love that moment with the Halloween
with the fake
costume.
knife.
It's so great. He's like, "Ouch!"
And then
it's fake. It's
and
fake.
then at the very end of the movie again to really
Oh yes,
I'll
yeah.
be right here, which like
rule of threes right
yeah,
there.
and
one to establish, one for a laugh, and then the third to make you cry.
Again, it's like fast talking Hollywood person. They might hear a kid say that, and they might, they could turn him into a poochie, where it's I think that's something that a Mac and me would do. So sorry to say, but
I think you're pretty spot
no
on
offense
there.
to the makers of Mac and me.
Now you've alluded to the fact that there's some backstory to this. At the very top, when I introduced you, I talked about the fact that you wrote and ran the newsletter Hollywood and Spine, which is a wonderfully creative title, by the way.
Thank you.
I absolutely love it. And you have intimate knowledge of this novelization.
I do.
Yeah. And I have a couple questions specifically for you because I know that E.T. is such a beloved film. I am curious how the novelization is treated by fans. Like, is it canonical? Is it like glorified fanfic? Is it something in between? Like, what is it?
It's a little of both. So William Kotzwinkle, a fantasy author who was commissioned to write the novelization, we'll take it back to people who might not know. This is a time when home video didn't exist. The only way you could see a movie is if it got released in theaters or if it got re-released in theaters. Maybe it would end up on television eventually. In the case of E.T., that took many years. So the way that you would relive the experience is you would go to the bookstore and you would buy a book like what I have in my hand right now, the original paperback of E.T. And because of the three-legged race of getting a book to the printer in time for the movie to come out, an author rarely, if ever, sees what at the time would not see what was being filmed.
Right, they get like the script.
Would get the script,
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes we get some photos, would get some other things. Alan Dean Foster, who wrote the novelization of Alien, very famously talked about how Fox would not give him a picture of the alien. So he did not. He everything was very abstract. There was no big jaws coming out with the head and the tail.
He could only work with what he was given.
Right.
Yeah.
So and so in doing so, there's a lot of concepts in the case of E.T. that did not make it to the film. As far as canonicity, the interesting thing is that 3 years later, when around the time E.T. was being reissued in theaters for the first time, Kotzwinkle was commissioned to write an authorized sequel novel.
Wow.
It's called E.T., The Book of the Green Planet, and it is not terribly good. Basically, it does a thing I hate with sequels, which is where it feels like all the growth a character has made in a film is somehow wiped off the map. Basically, it turns out E.T. is a botanist on his homeworld, and for the crime on his homeworld of interacting with humans, his stature as an elder botanist is revoked. He is, sent to the bean fields to work with the trainees.
This is answering some questions I have, by the way.
And he is miserable because he misses Elliot. And that is sweet, but also he wanted to get home.
Yeah.
And now he just wants to go back.
Yeah.
And the B plot is that in the time it took for E.T. to get home, Elliot's now a teenager.
I'm surprised he's even alive. Still.
Right, and he likes girls. There's a particular girl that he has a crush on.
Not pretty girl.
Pretty girl.
It's not. It's a different one.
Okay.
A different pretty girl.
There's never an until the end of the book. There's never a moment where E.T. and Elliot actually reunite, which is the whole. There's no emotional release of that.
Yeah. That's a bummer.
However, in terms of canonicity, what's very interesting, the Book of the Green Planet. The Green Planet is the canonical name of E.T.'s homeworld if you go on the E.T. adventure ride at Universal Studios, and all those little freaks in the ride come from the book. E.T.'s teacher, the Elder Botanicus, the Orbidon the Cloudbearer, the Tickly Moot Moot, Magdal the Sulking Beauty,
So wait a minute.
Jumpums,
So
all this
there is a
horse shit.
There's a whole world that was an outgrowth of the novelization that has been kind of folded in.
And it's only briefly, it's, the illusions in the original book are that E.T. is from a planet where they're probably not doing so much walking as they are paddling because of the little feet.
That makes sense.
And the aside that E.T.'s stature, sort of goblin squash like is actually considered quite handsome, and that the idea that humans are largely unusual because they're just stretched out little freaks, with the notable exception of Mary, who E.T. is basically infatuated with in the book.
Interesting.
Which,
so that's E.T.'s pretty girl.
Yes, exactly. Which is just that's totally what you'd want to see in a movie is an alien trying to mac on
a MILF.
Right. Yes. There's a lot of scenes that were filmed, that made it into the book, but were cut from the final film. But one thing in the book that is in a very early draft and it was gotten rid of was that Elliot actually did have one best friend, worst enemy, sort of like a little Eddie Haskell. He was a nerd, a little red-haired nerd named Lance.
I've always got to be red-haired.
Yes. And the bizarre trivia is Steven had provisionally offered the role to a young unknown actor named Corey Feldman.
I had heard that Corey Feldman was connected to this film in some way.
And then once the movie was but he remembered Corey, and so he put him in Gremlins and the Goonies.
Yeah.
And Mr. Kotzwinkle got to see E.T., what he looked like, but he doesn't have the benefit of seeing these performances.
Sure.
So his POV character for most of is E.T., which you don't get what E.T.'s thinking in the movie.
I was going to ask you, because I got to read about 30 pages of this novelization.
You've had 5 months.
I did have 5 months, but
a lot of other movies we
I
watched
also checked
in the
it out of the
meantime.
library, and I did have to return it. So
other people want to read
I
the
know.
E.T.
Other people
novelization.
gotta read it.
I got to keep the people happy. But the novelization is kind of told through E.T.'s eyes, which is super weird if you've seen the movie, because it's so contrary. This movie is so much about seeing or about this story as it's told through Elliot's eyes.
And I think making E.T. a POV character and Kotzwinkle, who was, again, a relatively, acclaimed writer of young adult fantasy books, his florid prose, the way he describes
It's
E.T.
beautiful. It's great.
He's not content of just calling him E.T., especially because E.T. is not named E.T. until about halfway through the movie.
That's right.
So you get a lot of the cosmic wanderer, the archaic voyager, all sorts of very flowery descriptions of an alien, which is really fascinating. And he's less preoccupied with the details. There's not, the sense of place that I think keeps drawing people to this movie. That it is it feels real, lived in. There's clutter. It is a set, but it's not. It doesn't look like one. It looks really like a house.
Yeah.
And there's, I think, a little bit more of a more holistic view, I suppose, and that leads to a very fascinating experience, but one that was not unwelcome. I mean, again, as this movie was so popular, it was one of the best-selling books of 1982, as well as being the biggest movie of 1982 and ever. I opened this, the printing history here. The original pressing was, printing was June 1982 when the movie came out. This is apparently its 19th printing in August of the same year. So already, and not in a fun Taylor Swift album way, but I've seen maybe 5 or 6 different covers of this book.
Yeah.
Because they just were like, all right, let's
we got to get these on the shelves, man.
Right, let's this with the John Helvin artwork. Let's this with the some Drew Struzan artwork and the fingers touching and the moon and the bike, all the things that you can imagine. And people bought it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, going back to something that you had said a minute ago about how E.T. in the book is not called E.T. I mean, it's one thing I feel like doesn't get stated enough about this title. I like that it's a nickname.
Yes.
And that, adds to the childlike quality of it, but that it's also just, aside from it being something a kid comes up with, it's familiar. It's
yes.
Down to earth as many of these, as many things in a very on the nose way are in the story. I mean, in talking about how the character is named, I had to think of just a few years ago, The Mandalorian began. And there's, of course, Baby Yoda is how that character is more commonly known. But I mean, spoiler alert for The Mandalorian, we learn in season 2 that he has a name, Grogu.
Yeah.
And I feel like
my wife was like, I'm not calling him that.
Yeah, but still, like,
I think your
Baby
wife
Yoda.
is in the majority.
like Baby Yoda is still the foremost term in my mind for that character. It's whether it's because of the cuteness or it being the first thing that comes up. But I mean, I think it's interesting. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like we don't get like a birth name for E.T.
No, I will say there's one place where that did come up, and it is not canon.
Okay.
In the month after E.T. was released and started doing very well, Steven and Melissa, they were enticed to go back to the well, and there is a 10-page treatment. You can find it online. It is worse than E.T. in the Book of the Green Planet. It's called E.T. 2, Nocturnal Fears. In this 10-page treatment, E.T. is the rare good guy on his planet, a planet full of just absolute shit eaters. And they're, they've been they're like, we gotta find our guy. He's on this planet, and they like basically kidnap Elliot and Michael and Gertie and Mary, and E.T. has to come back, and
This already sucks.
It sucks, and again, you don't get the reunion of the two characters until the very end of the bit. The thing that really fascinates me about this movie is that you think of all the movies that have made millions and billions of dollars. Your Marvel movies, your Star Wars movies, your James Bond movies, your Toy Story movies, your anything. There is one E.T. There is no E.T. 2. There were a couple of
might have been, but
right.
there wasn't.
There are a couple of ill-conceived, like
video games.
The video games, but there was a NBC Comcast commercial a couple years ago.
Oh yes,
during Thanksgiving. Which was, it was whatever. There's one before that, which most people don't remember, was the Super Bowl in 1999, the height of the .com boom. And the halftime show is sponsored by a then relatively unknown Progressive Auto Insurance. And they get the license to use E.T. in a campaign that's going to promote seatbelt safety. Because when I think of E.T., I think of seatbelt safety. And it's this multi-million-dollar ad. There's a cameo from Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, and they imported E.T. models from the ride in Japan, and I think Don LaFontaine, the trailer guy, is like the announcer in the commercial.
I had no idea.
It's very hard to find on YouTube, and it's very stupid.
I have to imagine though. With all the star power behind it, this has to be the thing that put Progressive more on the map.
In some ways,
this is like
Before
pre-flow. Pre-flow.
Yeah. But everything is a commercial now. But like, I find that stuff's easy to put out of your mind. There's no ET3. Here's ET's brother, and Bronson Pinchot voices him for some reason.
Serge.
Right. It makes me feel like a little bit of a record store clerk, but there is sort of a my favorite movie hasn't been done to death,
Right.
But I think it does help the movie occupy a very interesting space in culture.
Totally.
That it is not, there's certainly memes,
Yeah, but
there's always
that to me
memes.
is like it's like the Weird Alification. It's like,
well played.
if you've been memed, it's like you are part of culture.
Right.
Or like the Simpsonsification.
There we go.
Yes.
That too.
But it's not something that is, I think people sometimes forget what made the original so special. And I don't think E.T. has that problem.
No, it doesn't. Luckily not.
It's interesting that this all comes up because there's only one E.T. movie, but I feel like when you look at it in the continuum of Spielberg's greater career, when you consider Spielberg as a name, he makes hit after hit. Mm-hmm. And so in some ways, even though this movie doesn't technically have a sequel, it does feel kind of like part of the franchise of Spielberg.
I think that's a great way of describing it. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, and I think the great thing too is that everything especially all the Amblin stuff he lent his name to that has traces of E.T. DNA. Mm-hmm. I think, in as much as he could,
like Batteries Not Included,
but also Gremlins and the Goonies really made a point to try to spin it a little bit.
To the point you said too, that the Amblin logo
Well,
Yeah.
certainly.
is E.T.
Yeah.
So it is like a brand. It is like a continuation.
Yeah, and I imagine that could maybe quiet the studios at this time to a certain extent, and maybe they were not pushing as hard for a sequel since there are like these other films at the time that are clearly extremely inspired by E.T. and have some of the DNA and have Spielberg's like fingerprint on them to an extent.
Yeah,
I
think it's a great
imagine
point.
if we did not have these, then the studios would be like banging down Spielberg's door, like we have to have a sequel.
Yeah.
And I think, and especially in the case of Universal, who put out the movie, I think eventually got what they wanted. Because there's now 6 Jurassic Park movies, soon to be a
just keep
7th.
coming.
They cannot stop making movies with Jurassic dinosaurs in them. But he's put the rubber stamp on it, and Universal's like, all right, great. Like, so any sadness about not getting ET2, they're crying into their huge piles of money from Jurassic World Dominion or whatever.
Dominion, I think is the most recent one.
I mean,
That's a great point, Madeline. Yeah.
Yeah, not long after E.T. as well. I mean, Spielberg himself makes a sequel with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Yeah.
And we did see, I think rather quickly, that movie was like made a lot of money, but I think there was something about that
He
soured
really
him.
doesn't like that movie as much as I wish he did.
There is a lot to like.
There really is.
Temple of Doom.
There's some tough stuff, but
yeah.
I mean, I remember reading that he grew disenchanted when making the Lost World Jurassic Park too, which is
for good reason. Yes.
Yeah. Although I think that movie is nowhere near as great as the original Jurassic Park, but it has some redeeming qualities. I don't think it's a bad movie. I think it's like a middling movie.
Yeah.
Which for Spielberg,
when you're next, right? That's the thing.
But
like okay, Spielberg is like
what happened here?
It's like latter day MCU sometimes. You know,
that sounds like kind of a disdainful meme. Okay, Spielberg.
Yeah, totally.
He is a boomer.
He is.
I want to maybe pivot a little bit because another one of your, I'm going to say qualifications to talk about E.T. is that you wrote the liner notes for the 40th anniversary reissue of this soundtrack.
For the 35th anniversary, the record label La La Land Records put out a wonderful 2 CD presentation. And my dear friend, Mike Matacino, who is basically John Williams' restoration guy, whenever there is an archival John Williams work they want to reissue on CD, he is the guy who puts it together. He produces it, he mixes it, he masters it. He is usually the one writing the liner notes. And he very graciously, when the vinyl came out, he said, he had done the notes for the 35th. We've been friends. He graciously gave me a creative consulting credit on that one. He, in 2022, Mondo Records, they were doing a 40th anniversary pressing of the vinyl of E.T. He said, "Would you like to write the notes?" And I almost dropped my phone. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Again, Mike has told the story, and the story has been told of what this means for John, what this means for Steven, what this means for their 50-plus year collaboration. I want to give you just a concise, chill version. I knew how I wanted to structure it. I wanted to put you right in the middle of one of the greatest anecdotes in film composing history. It was basically the music that started when Elliot's clearing off the communicator and he sees the light in the sky and the spaceship is coming down. John, he's done his spotting sessions with Steven. They watch the movie without music. Here's where we want to put music. Here's, he goes off, he writes it by hand, pencil and paper. Often
Old school.
Often orchestrating his own stuff. With help, he has help, but
we're talking about the GOAT here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He has this challenge of making the score fit rhythmically and mathematically to this picture, and it's just not working. And John is just at the podium scratching his head. Why? It's not happening the way I want it to. And Steven says, "I'm going to take the picture off, and I want you to just do as if you were in a concert hall." And he does that, and Steven goes back and reconfigures the edit to fit the music instead of the other way around. And you think, for Steven to have the utmost faith in his collaborator that he's like, "I'm going to change what I did." He called John his musical rewrite artist.
Mm-hmm.
I make the movie, and then John recontextualizes it with his score. And in the canon of John Williams, there's Jaws and Star Wars and Superman and Indy and
Home Alone,
Harry Potter.
and
You know,
Hook.
it's you know, like it's easy for a movie like this to get lost in the shuffle. But the fact that it doesn't for many people,
Yeah, I mean,
you know, it was his fourth of 5 Oscars. You know, he only won 5 Oscars, but he is currently the most Oscar-nominated person
like by
on
a
the
long
planet.
shot.
Yeah, not even
on
just
the planet.
musician.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think cumulatively second only to Walt Disney.
Yeah, it's also a very
Um,
different type of affiliation. It's
Exactly.
like, you know,
But,
John Williams is sitting there writing everything by hand. and
Right,
Walt
right.
Disney's like, here's a check. Go
Right.
make a great piece of
But
work.
the thematic richness of it, the main flying theme,
Yeah.
the overarching theme, the what John calls the call, which is I believe the 7 note. That's the one.
Yep, that one.
You know, the sort of the friendship motif. There's also little bits all throughout.
There's
and,
one that I really like. I think I've heard it called like the suburban theme, which is the one, and I'll just call this back really briefly to the horror elements that trickle into this film. Is the suburban theme is really calling back to Bernard Herrmann's score in Psycho.
Yeah.
The like,
Yeah.
it's like you have that like pulse of eighth notes,
I
and it's
like
just these
that.
quarter notes that are kind of moving up and down and stuff. If I listened to the score for E.T.
Sure.
and then I immediately put on the scene in Psycho where Janet Leigh's driving
that's
away,
a great
Yeah.
connection.
driving away with the money in the
Yeah.
car. You cannot tell me that they're not
Yeah,
influenced.
that's fascinating.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think John Williams is a great demonstrator of intervals in scores. I find whenever I have to explain a minor second to someone, Jaws.
Totally.
Just right away.
Yeah, that's
Iconic.
the go-to.
But also, like within the ET theme, I think what really the first time I watched it years and years ago, the thing that really stuck out to me about the score was that fifth right at the beginning of the main theme. The
Yeah.
da, da. And of course, if you know Star Wars, I mean, it's a very obvious connection.
Right.
And that was, more ingrained for me at that
And
point.
Close Encounters too.
Yep.
Which
Up
I
Perfect
still
Fifth.
haven't seen, actually.
Up Perfect Fifth.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, John Williams, I mean, I think part of why he is so renowned as a film composer is because he's great at, creating this kind of bright consonance in his music that is, I mean, it's very listenable, even if it's, there's kind of a populism to it. It's done really, really
Right.
well.
Just like Steven, it can be easy to dunk on, but it's like, but to do something that simple so well and on a scale that has clearly
Resonated.
Yeah.
No, using musical terms to describe it, scale, resonate.
I like that. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Did you have anything?
Yeah, I had heard this story about, the film being about Spielberg to an extent recutting part of the film to go with the score. I love that story. I'm so glad that you brought that up. I think I had heard it on the Unspooled episode for E.T.
Yes.
And I think it just speaks to the trust that these two creators have for each other and the trust that Spielberg had for John Williams at this point, knowing that Williams was going to create something magnificent. And all he had to do was just marry the two things together. And he was willing to take on this kind of extra work to make something really, really special. And I think ultimately that's something that works for E.T. as a whole, is that Spielberg is willing to go that little extra mile with every aspect of this movie.
Very quickly, the way that their collaboration had been forged in fire from, of course, Sugar and Express being the first, but, Jaws, Steven cut parts of Jaws Tempt to Images, which is a Robert Altman movie that John scored, which is a very dissonant score. And then John comes back and says, no, I'm thinking more of like a pirate movie. And then eventually gives him 2 notes, and he's like, I thought he was
There's
joking.
more to this, right? Yeah.
And then to mathematically come up with 5 notes, not 7, 5 for Close Encounters, and then for Raiders, where he's like, we need a heroic march, and John comes back with two things. He comes back with
I love this story too.
ba, 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 ba.
Yep.
And then he also comes back with ba, ba, ba,
Da,
ba,
da,
ba,
da,
ba,
da,
ba,
da. Yeah, yeah.
ba. And Steven's like, we'll use both.
And John's like, I didn't think to do that.
Right.
That's brilliant. He said that. He said that. And that speaks to what you were saying, Madeline. I think the two of them, this movie is a wonderful demonstration
Of
of their artistic collaboration.
Again, you think of Hitchcock and Herman. You think of Scorsese and Thelma Schoonmaker,
Yeah.
editor. Burton and Elfman. You don't get once in a lifetime. You get a connection with a person artistically on a level with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really quite special.
Unbelievable.
Any other quick thoughts about that?
A fun fact about John Williams as a composer, or not about him, but about the name John Williams, is that some months ago we all watched The Deer Hunter for a different episode, and if you look in the music compositions credit, it says John Williams. It is a different John
It is
Williams.
a classical guitar player.
Yeah,
Yep.
which is so funny because I thought, well, I mean, when you listen to the theme music of that movie, it's beautiful, but I was like, oh, this doesn't sound like other stuff that John Williams has done. And you just find out it's a different John Williams, but this movie comes out like very close in time to a lot of these other things he's very well known for.
The way that must have driven record store employees nuts over the line.
I know, right? I want to take some time.
Yes.
I think this movie is so packed full of moments and little details that just really stick with us. And I just love for us to maybe go around and just share some of these,
sure.
if you don't mind. Yeah.
One thing that I have no idea if there's any meaning into this, but I think one of Michael's friends at the end, at the beginning of the bike riding scene, I mean, you can see on I can't remember who it is, but on one of their hats, though, I think the word Camus is there.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think the fan community has always tried to figure out why that is the case. And I don't think there's any, unfortunately, I'm not sure there's any deeper hitting meaning to it, but it is very funny.
I mean, Camus just, aesthetically is so incredibly different from anything that you'd see in a Spielberg movie. I found that to be like an odd juxtaposition, but maybe that's just, the hat that was available in wardrobe that day.
Yeah.
But, and another little thing, I mean, there's a couple little details I noticed, but one other that I'm going to shout out is that when you look around Elliot's room, I mean, there's a bunch of posters and iconography of things that you would expect, like Star Wars. But the one musician poster I noticed was of Elvis Costello, which seems like a bit of I like that, but it's kind of a precocious interest for someone
For a
that age
10-year-old.
at that time.
And Robert as Michael is
maybe Mike
singing-
tunelessly.
Yeah.
He's singing. Accidents will happen.
Yeah.
Which is a real.
Yeah.
That's Armed Forces.
Armed
right?
Forces, yeah. The one with the elephants
Yes.
on the cover. Yeah.
Terrific.
I mean,
record.
there are bunk beds in this room. Do they share this room?
That's a good point.
It
Good
must
point.
because you never see his room.
Oh, that's true. I
Yeah,
noticed
you
that
never
this
Because
see
time
it.
the
too.
closet connects.
It's
to Gertie's room.
Yes.
Yes.
And it
So
makes
it
sense the
must
boys
be.
would share a room and then the daughter has a different room. So maybe Mike put the poster there.
Yeah, that's great idea.
Yeah, I can't go without telling this story. This another Star Wars bit. Not, of course, the moment of Yoda and the quote of Yoda's theme, which is brilliant, of John. But
This is at the Halloween.
Yeah.
Yes.
When they're walking Halloween.
Yes,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
there's a
Mask.
great story that Robert had told. Because they shot everything in sequence. When he sees E.T. is basically when they rolled camera.
No.
And he was trying to get out of Henry. What is it?
And Henry's like, I have absolute power.
Well, one thing that both of them really liked was a program on KMET-FM in California called the Dr. Demento Show.
Ah.
And one of the songs that they really liked that was very high on the Funny Five at the time was a home demo. There was a parody of the song Lola by the Kinks called Yoda by a then relatively unknown comedic musician named Weird Al Yankovic.
Yes. The planet where it bubbles all the time like a giant carbonated
Absolutely.
soda.
And so they really enjoyed that. And so I think it was Henry who said, you should do like a Yoda voice when you say you have absolute power. Now, what was very significant, 2017, at the same time as the 30th anniversary celebration is ramping up, I'm also in my day job at the time, I was an editorial manager for Legacy Recordings, the catalog division of Sony Music. And I had been working for 2 years on Squeezebox, the complete works of Weird Al Yankovic, a 14-disc box set in a beautifully.
That's a fantastic name, by the way, for
It's
a Weird Al.
Yeah.
I cannot claim credit for it. I wish I could remember who did. It was all his albums and a bonus disc of rarities, and on that bonus disc was that same demo of Yoda.
Wow.
And so
the very one that was listened to by,
and so it was a beautiful 3D printed replica of his accordion. The albums were in the Bellows. Megan Foley and Annie Stoll.
That's like incredible, man.
Annie, especially if you're listening to this, I love you. I hope you're doing okay. And I had met Robert around that time, and I had said to him, I was like, this is coming out like at the same time. It's really cool that that's happening. He has a great Instagram account. I believe it's called Action Figure Michael. When they did the 20th anniversary edition, Toys R Us made an action figure of him. It does not look like him.
Okay.
He would probably be the first to admit that, but he will go to these cons and he'll go to signings and he'll have different people, the Stranger Things kids and Elvis Costello and Paul Stanley, all these different people will take these pictures with this action figure. And he gave me one. He said, can you get Al to take one, a photo? I was like, I had to get the 15-second elevator pitch. I was like, Al, I'm friends with the guy who played Michael in E.T. Would you take this picture with this action figure of him? He goes, yeah, sure. And he did, and had a fun look.
And you were the hero of the day.
Yes, yeah. and then Robert posted it on Instagram, and he photoshopped out the background and replaced it with the background of Dagobah. Which
nice.
was really
full circle moment with all that.
It
I
was
love that.
really funny.
Yeah,
and one of my personal favorite memories of being a wacky fan of this movie.
That's a pretty good one. How about you? Anything?
I want to know, from your perspective as guitar teachers, how effective do you think E.T. would be at playing guitar? Because I just kept looking at his hands, missing a finger. That seems... One less finger. That seems
didn't stop
difficult.
Django Reinhardt.
Exactly. Plenty of people have overcome that. I do
that.
feel like his fingertips are kind of globular. I
That'd
feel
be a
like
little tough. I think he'd be a better bass player then.
Okay.
I love that.
Yeah.
I was about to say I think he'd play Guitar Hero pretty well.
That's true.
That's absolutely
That's
right.
a good point. He'd be a bit of a project. What do you think, Julian?
Yeah, I agree with that. But I also think that, the idea of him playing bass, that's easier to imagine.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so too. You mentioned earlier that there are some iconic insults that are thrown in this movie. Penis breath. I think that
classic.
actually is one of the earliest memories I have of this movie. And I love
Certainly.
Dee Wallace in that scene is so perfect. Her reaction is like, she laughs at first because she's like legitimately like, what did I just hear my kids say? That's kind of funny. But then she's got to pivot really fast and be like, I got to lay down the law. We don't speak like that. And it's really perfectly acted. I love it.
It's also brilliantly set up by kind of under the radar moment of Tommy Howell as Tyler when they're coming back into the
house.
To the house. He calls Elliot a douchebag.
Oh, that's right.
And
she's like,
whacks him against the back
she's
of the
like, we
head.
don't talk like that.
No douchebag talk in my house.
Yeah, for sure.
Those are like the kind of details that if this movie had come out just a few years later could have earned it a PG-13.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. I also love that scene when Elliot and Michael go to the bus, and Elliot and
Cinema
Greg
Supremus.
start.
Zero charisma.
Zero charisma. I love how they're just going back and forth.
I thought
like,
you were going to say the your anus joke.
Oh, well,
That too.
there's that too. But
That's a
I mean,
classic.
I feel like that one's kind of in culture a little bit more. But
it
those
is,
other
yeah.
two, I love. There's also a feistiness to Elliot that I love. Like, he gives as much as he gets.
It's the feistiness of a kid whose voice hasn't changed yet.
Yeah,
And
that's
like
true.
really has to hold his own against people whose voices have.
Yeah, I like that he can kind of like play ball with his older brother's friends.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in the initial scene where they're playing either Dungeons and Dragons or some kind of knockoff.
Yeah, some version of it, right?
I feel like it was, I don't know if it was we can't get the name or something.
Yeah. But it's that kind of role-playing game, and he does seem kind of like
on the outside a little bit.
On the outside a little bit here, but then by the time you get to that bus stop scene, he's absolutely lobbing these insults.
And there is, and talking again about sequels, there was a coda that they wisely did not use in the movie that was meant to end the movie, where they're back to the table at the Dungeons and Dragons, but now Elliot is the dungeon master, and all the other boys are treating him with the respect.
Wow.
And it's not at the table. I think it's in the room. because because at the very end, they're playing, and it pans out through like a skylight in Elliot's room, and you see on the roof is the communicator.
Oh,
like they're
he's still in
trying to
contact.
communicate.
Like that they're
him.
gonna talk again. And I'm so glad, so glad that they.
I also feel like it's very pure, the message at the very end of the film,
and to literally end with the face,
right?
The Spielberg face,
But the idea that like Elliot somehow gets like this elevated position, and maybe we see him kind of revel in it a little bit. I feel like takes something away.
Yeah,
you know?
totally.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
When we did the soundtrack, Jim Titus, who's a great graphic designer, did this beautiful piece of original art, which Mondo sold as a poster. I'm very privileged to have one signed by John Williams.
I've seen that, by the way.
It's pretty cool. Which is crazy.
It's pretty cool.
But he did this beautiful piece of artwork where it's just Elliot, he's got the bike, he's got the red jacket on. He's just looking up at the sky. That to me is that's where I would want that to end.
Yeah.
It's like he's always that kid, as old as he is, whatever happens to him, he's always going to be looking up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. There's some great line readings in this movie. Mm-hmm. I kind of want to open this up though, like to other people. I've got one that I'm going to hold on to, but are there any that you guys have latched onto?
There's a lot of great lines in the movie, and I mean, normally I write down more lines than just one when I'm taking notes ahead of conversations, but the one that I had to write down this time is during the scene after they've acclimated E.T. to living in their house, when Michael and Elliot are going off to school the next day, and Michael asks Elliot, "Did you tell E.T. about school?" And Elliot just says, "How do I explain school to higher intelligence?"
Yeah, so good.
That was my favorite line this time. I mean, there's a bunch of great ones, but that was the one I kept thinking of.
This is not even a line, but I would feel remiss if I didn't shout out one of my favorite weird little bits. It's a sound that a man makes. The bikes are being chased. There's a patrol car rounds around the bottom of the hill, and a guy gets out, and they cut the kid.
Yeah, they're like, "We got him stopped
here." And then the guy looks, he goes, "Ugh," like that. And that guy is he's a stuntman. His name is Ted Grossman. If you've seen Jaws, he is in Jaws. He's the guy who in the rowboat.
I was just going to ask
his
you.
Leg,
the
gets
rowboat
eaten
guy.
by the shark. His leg falls to the bottom. Yeah. He's briefly in Raiders of the Lost Ark. You see him for a second. He's also in the Goonies. He's the dead body that they find shot in the head in the "It's a staff" in the refrigerator.
Cool.
I also just like that scene in general because whoever they are that are chasing the kids, he's so confident. He's like,
confident.
We've cut the kids off at the bottom of the hill. And I love that the kids just like ride their bikes over top of the car.
Yeah, it's great.
I love that. These adults, they think they have it all under control.
Uh-huh.
And I love that this film just is telling you time and time again that these kids will find a way.
Yeah. I love it too. I have two quick ones that I love. Drew Barrymore has that great line where she goes like, they're trying to figure out what he is. And she goes, "Is he a pig? He sure eats like one." Really funny.
All
really
of
great.
her line readings are great.
Are really good.
And even when they're heartfelt, they're very sweet and effective from her. Like towards the beginning in that the dinner scene when they're kind of going back and forth like, "Oh, I set the table. No, I did." And then he says, "Well, I did breakfast." And she says, "I did breakfast."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's so sweet, but it's also so heartbreaking.
But actually, this stuck with me from my first viewing as a kid, was when she finally stops just repeating what other people are saying when they say something about the dad being in Mexico. She goes, "Where's Mexico?"
Yeah. I mean, it sets up their dynamic so perfectly. You said at the very top, Elliot is old enough to like wound and to be spiteful and to feel that emotion. Mm-hmm. She is not. She's too young to really fully grasp it. And Michael, on the other side of things, he's old enough to understand that he needs to be like his mom's protector. Yeah. It's really great. One last thing about Michael. This is a really small moment, but every time I've seen this movie, from adulthood on, I get the biggest laugh out of it. It's when Michael comes into the room. Gertie has just like dressed him up. Oh yeah. And he's coming back from school and he just kind of wanders in and he goes like, he's like, get this big smile on his face. He's like, "What's all this shit?" And he says so perfectly. Yeah. You blink and you miss it. It's
Yeah.
It's next level. It's so
and
good.
one of those details that, with respect to the Stranger Things people would just never get, the no nukes shirt that he's wearing.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
sets it in a time and place without hitting you over the head with a, this is the reference. Caprice Roth, too, I want to shout. I don't know these people, but Caprice Roth was the mime who did the hands.
Oh, that's right.
yes.
Yeah, that's right. Because E.T., like the body is its own thing, but
Yeah.
the hands are
And
very
The
two-
puppetry in
the
this
two
is just
moments,
next level.
real quick, are right before E.T. makes the clay balls float in the air. There's a little piece of melon on. E.T.'s eating the fruits.
Oh,
and
that's
stuff,
right, yeah.
And Caprice picked it off like a person would. And then the other one, which I have found myself doing. Caprice had said in an interview not that long ago when she remembered when her and I believe her sibling and their mother, when they were sick, the mother would hold them and hug them and would stroke the back of.
And
that is what E.T. does.
Oh wow,
and
so
that
crazy.
is what I do with my girls when they cry.
Oh, dude, getting lessons from the very best.
Nicole, my wife, if you haven't clocked that, you have now.
Nice. Any other little details?
I mean, I can't get over "This is reality, Greg."
Oh, it's the best.
It's the best line in the whole film, and that's like a very high bar.
It is. But the reading on it is great. I love it too because he's like, "Can you just beam up?" Yeah. It's like,
it's a fair question.
It is a fair question, and I also love to, like you said, we're watching a movie, but we're being told this is reality. I love it.
Right,
It's so
and
great.
again, the power dynamic, because who's the biggest jerk to him is Greg.
It's Greg, yeah.
And then
Yeah.
he's just,
Yeah, totally. Yeah. There's that scene where Mary is reading to Gertie in bed.
Oh.
Yeah,
This
Peter Pan.
scene, it hits me on such a level. I mean, first off, shout out to all the hardworking moms and parents that after a long day, putting in the hours, being super stressed out, they still make enough time to read to their kids. So that was really lovely. Obviously, their bonding, that is really sweetly depicted. But I think the thing that I caught this time, I think it's easy to forget that by this point in the movie, Gertie knows that there's E.T.
Yeah.
And so when her mom is like, let's clap and try to make these fairies, it's like her worldview has just been blown wide open. Of course she's going to think that she can conjure up fairies. Like, I find that to be so beautiful. And like, her mom doesn't know that.
Yeah.
But we know that. I think that's such a beautiful. Yeah.
But also there's a callback to it later, because it's not just like, oh, we're going to make the fairy. They're like, the claps are bringing Tinkerbell back to life.
Right.
And later, after E.T. dies, I don't know what the exact line is. I didn't write it down. Mike, maybe you know it. But she says something like, can we clap?
Can we wish for him to come back?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. It was very, very sad.
Yeah. Really moving. But I love that. And I love that E.T. and Elliot both have the wherewithal and the like emotional depth to just like stop and watch and just like take it in. Watching it this last time, I was like,
and the tenderness.
This is like the
scarf
scene
around
of the movie.
neck.
Yeah.
It's not a little detail, but part of why this movie is so resonant is that the emotional journeys you see all the characters go through surrounding E.T. are things that you could just experience with a terrestrial, just with any person in real life. The experience of, it was talking about Drew Barrymore's acting in the scene when E.T. dies. It's like, the experience when a close relative dies when you're young. Mm-hmm. Or, I mean, in many ways, I think this movie is just about having a best friend who moves away.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And, it's like, forget the symbolism of an imaginary friend. It's just, it just represents that journey with a real friend that maybe you've had. Yeah, I just think that's so much of the reason why it works. But then again, there's always that extraterrestrial appeal of it.
And you think 40-something years ago, when a best friend could move away, you couldn't find them on Facebook. Later, and that's really trenchant. And I think that's really something that makes this movie really one of a kind. That it speaks to something that we have all maybe felt but are not able to articulate.
Sure.
Yeah.
And and again, that's the power. I don't know, the power of cinema. But like that. But that is, that's the beauty of this movie, that helps us articulate something that words alone cannot do. And we're all obviously in the year 2024 wishing for a better, saner, juster, kinder world, more than maybe we did even in 1982.
Mm-hmm.
And to have a 1 hour 55-minute moment where that path forward is easy and it's easily attainable is really beautiful. I don't know.
Absolutely.
We'll take this opportunity to shift over to our little segment we call Unlikely Shared Universe.
All right. So the one that I could think of, it'll be quick to go through, but that perhaps Elliot is a distant descendant of someone who had lived in New York around circa 1860. I think you can already see where this is going. Or maybe an individual named Johnny Sirocco with some involvement in organized crime at that time who, goes on a few sides of a situation, but is generally caught in the wind of an acquaintance of his who people call Amsterdam, having sought revenge for the murder of his father by a man who was known for his use of knives.
Yes.
And, this is just homage to the fact that the only other film that I've seen this lead actor,
Henry Thomas
in is Gangs of New York.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, if you like horror, he's become a real featured player in the repertory of Mike Flanagan.
Yeah, The
yeah.
Haunting of Hill House verse, right?
I've read that. I haven't seen any of that, though.
Yeah. He's in Dr. Sleep, too, right?
Yeah.
He is.
Yeah.
The
He's
unenviable position of playing Jack Nicholson, basically.
Yeah, basically.
Here's Henry.
All right. And I'll bring us home here with mine. One of Michael's friends is Tyler. And he's got a couple moments, like we know he doesn't like anchovies on his pizza.
Not the little fishies.
Exactly, none of those. And he's the one who keeps harping on that Uranus joke. But he's pretty nondescript and doesn't really separate himself too much from the group. But he has a front row seat to all the stuff that goes down. And as it would be for any normal teenage boy, this changes him forever. Black is white, up is down. He struggles to resume a normal life. And for fear that he might break and go public with his close encounter, the government strikes a deal with him and his family to grant them new identities and a chance to start fresh in a different part of the country. They take the deal and they ship him off to the Midwest. And Tyler now goes by a different name, Jim Halsey. He goes to high school in the Midwest. Mostly things are okay. And when he graduates, he gets this odd job to deliver a car from where he lives in Chicago back to the West Coast. And with memories of his childhood shaken up by an exciting new presence, he takes off driving, excited to return to the scene where his life was forever changed. But this drive out west becomes a true nightmare when he picks up a hitchhiker named Ryder, who soon presents himself to be a psychotic killer with a desire to toy with Jim for just a little while and then kill him too. Do we know what movie this is?
Nope.
That's The Hitcher.
Yes.
I'm so glad you didn't go with Soul Man.
Yes, I love that you know about Soul Man. Do you guys know about Soul Man?
I do not.
No.
The less we say about it, the better. No, we're going with The Hitcher, which has a really fun Rutger Hauer performance.
Yes.
All right. Any final thoughts about E.T.?
It remains a classic. I was very glad to revisit it for discussing it here. It holds up superbly. Many praises unto E.T.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this and you haven't seen E.T. in a while and you thought, I've seen it, I don't need to rewatch it before listening to this podcast episode, go rewatch E.T. I do anticipate you will not be disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
I want to piggyback off that. Look, I've seen it countless times. I am often going to see it when it is in a theater. And I have two requests to the New York metro area. One, I would love to see an original 35 millimeter print of the movie. With the big difference is the sound mix. Some of the sound effects are different. The big tell is a lot of the dialogue was rewritten in the hospital sequences for the 20th anniversary by Michael Crichton of Jurassic Park fame.
Oh, wow.
To make the dialogue sound a little bit more like
Snappier?
ER.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
But I would love to see that original version again. And more directly and to the point, film programmers of New York City and outlying boroughs, if you need a host, if you want someone to talk for 5 to 7 minutes, I would love nothing more. I've been lucky to have great friends who want to shout out, please, Cassine Gaines, great writer who wrote in 2022 E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial, The Ultimate Visual History, with great, rare images, and he did a great job interviewing all the cast and crew. I've been lucky enough to write the liner notes. The only thing at this point I could possibly want is to anywhere from 50 to 150 people, maybe some friends, and just introduce the movie and just expound on it in a very condensed version of what I've done here.
If a programmer from Metrograph is listening to our podcast, please hit up Mike.
There we
Yes.
go. And Mike, where can they find you?
Oh my goodness. Let's see. In order of underscores, you can find me on Letterboxd. The username is Sir, S-I-R, Duke, D-U-Q-U-E, with no underscores. You can find me on Instagram at Sir_Duke. You can find me on X, the Everything app, formerly known as Twitter, at Sir_Duke. And then you can also check out thesecondisc.com, which is humbly stated the best source for news and opinions on reissues, compilations, box sets. And you can go to Duke's Delight, D-U-Q-E-S -delight.ghost.io. You can subscribe for free if you want to kick a couple bucks. I'm a new dad to twins. Well, any little bit helps. I'm slowly republishing. Hollywood and Spine was on Tiny Letter, which got MailChimp was like, we don't need that anymore. So I'm gradually going through and republishing about 50 or so old issues, including we will be redoing the E.T. and the E.T. the Book on the Green Planet. We'll be republishing very soon. I write about pop music and, anything that's on my mind. I'm free to write any and all liner notes, PR, social copy. Again, I'm a stay-at-home dad, freelancing. Hire me.
I just want to second that.
Thank you.
Write incredible stuff, and if anybody listening doesn't already get it from listening to you, you are an incredibly passionate person about the stuff that you love.
You will get as much or as little detail or trivia as you want, but I like to hope, in my writing, that you at least get a sense of the wonder and emotion of the medium in which I'm writing about. If I can do that, then I've done my job.
Wonderful.
Amazing.
Well, in addition to this podcast, you can follow us on TikTok and on Instagram at Sleepless Cinematic Pod. You can contact us via email. We would love to hear from you at sleeplesscinematicpod@gmail.com. Now, I am not on Letterboxd.
No.
But you guys are?
We are. So follow Mike on Letterboxd. You can also follow me, Madeline, at Patroness of Cats.
And you can follow me, Julian, at Julian_Barthold.
And if you're listening to us for the first time, thank you so much for finding us. And if this is your second or third or 20th time you've listened to us, thank you for sticking with us. We've really grown to love doing this, and it means the world to have our budding listenership grow.
And if you haven't already, we'd ask you, return listener, to please write a positive review and rate us on your podcast platform of choice. This is one of the best ways for new listeners to find us and help our podcast take its next steps. You can also keep it grassroots and tell a friend to tell a friend about the Sleepless Cinematic Podcast. That helps too.
Mike, thank you so much again for joining
Thank
us.
you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank
This
you.
is a
Of
pleasure.
course, of course. All right, guys. Good night.
Good night.
We'll be
Catch
right
that.
here.
That's right. We'll be right here.